Hi, my name's Jeannie. If you're new here, welcome to my channel where we talk about all things cancer. Today, I want to talk a bit about what it feels like to be a caregiver and the challenges that it entails. I have never been a caregiver per se. I did spend a few weeks with my sister when she had breast cancer. And when my mom got non-Hodgkin lymphoma, we were living on opposite sides of the world. But I did try to support her emotionally. I don't know if I made any difference whatsoever, but I did try to be there for them. So I am basing a lot of what we'll be covering today on conversations that I've had with caregivers, my own observations of what my caregivers had to go through, and articles and studies that I have read. Since my diagnosis, I have often wondered what it must feel like to be looked after by somebody who doesn't love you. And on the other side of the coin, what it feels like to look after someone that you don't really love anymore. And it could be for years. Suddenly you are forced to live a life that you didn't ask for. You may even have been contemplating divorce or started divorce proceedings. And then, bam, this happened. The in sickness and in health part plays over and over in your head. What can you do? It's not like you can leave her right now. What kind of person leaves his wife when she has cancer? I was surprised to find out how often it happens. There was a small study on specific types of cancer, and it showed that post-diagnosis, 11.6% of marriages end in divorce or separation. But that study was flawed. There are different types of relationship strain other than divorce and separation. In some cases, the caregiver may not actually leave their spouse, but there's an emotional abandonment. They withdraw. And for the patient, that is every bit as hurtful as being left. And I would imagine that caring for somebody with glioblastoma, incurable brain cancer, is a lot more difficult than dealing with a partner that has a precancerous lesion removed from his arm. It is a complex subject and one I am very grateful I don't have to face. My one friend calls me a unicorn because after 20 years together, my husband and I are still very happy. But I recognize that that is not always the case. So for the purposes of this video, let us focus on marriages or relationships that are maybe not ideal, but they're still functional. The couples who still love each other, who still share a life, even if it is imperfect. Or the siblings, parents, kids who have a complicated relationship with the person that they are caring for, but they still love them. Because that's the reality with most caregivers. They stay, they show up, they do their best. And from what I have been told, it is very, very hard. There's that moment when you get the news. Maybe you are sitting next to your spouse in the doctor's office. You hear the doctor's voice. It sounds like it's coming from somewhere else. You are hit with fear and confusion and shock. Or maybe the news breaks more slowly. In my case, I had been in hospital for about a week. The word cancer had been uttered at one point, but the last we'd heard was the hospitalist denying that he had ever implied that I had cancer. Turns out it was. When the hospital oncologist had left me, he had just confirmed that it was myeloma, a blood cancer. I called John, who had gone home to feed the dog. He had made me promise that I wouldn't keep anything from him to try and protect him. I told him that myeloma is incurable, and he was devastated. I could hear that he was crying, even though he was trying to hide that. He said he couldn't bear to see me going through that it was his worst nightmare. And he said he was hit by just an overwhelming sense of dread and uncertainty. There was one final test that took about a week to come in, and that would confirm beyond any doubt that it was multiple myeloma. I didn't realize it, but John had been holding out in the hope that I would be an exception and that it was myeloma. And when the result came in, I saw him close his eyes and exhale. Because the person that you love is sick and they may not get better, or maybe they do get better and then it comes back. And even if it doesn't, you recognize that your life is never going to be the same again. You don't know what the new version is going to look like, but you know that there is no going back. The future that you were both working towards suddenly looks really bleak. The holidays, the trips, slow evenings on the couch watching TV, all of those plans crumble. Even if your relationship isn't perfect, there's still an expectation of at least some degree of companionship. And then the more practical thoughts start creeping in. You may worry about your finances. Maybe you aren't insured. Maybe your insurance is through your spouse's job and he's not able to work anymore. Will your company be flexible to give you time off, or will they slowly edge you out? Will Medicare and Medicaid cover enough? What about the copays? What about the travel costs? What about the lost income? The parking fees at the hospital? It all adds up. Cancer is not cheap, even if you have good insurance. The questions are endless, and most of them don't have answers. You start wondering how long you'll have together. Will they be in a lot of pain? Are you going to have to watch them suffer? You may even ask yourself questions that you won't say out loud, like, will you ever be intimate again? The uncertainty takes a toll. You try to be supportive, you try to be strong, but no one gives you a manual of how to do that. You have to keep showing up, even though most of the time you feel helpless. You can't fix this. You cannot fast forward. You cannot swap places. And that helplessness wears on you. You may feel angry too. Angry at your spouse for smoking, for ignoring your advice, for not following up on that mammogram, for brushing off symptoms. And you may be angry at yourself for being angry. You may not say it out loud, but part of you thinks, even fleetingly, I did not sign up for this. And yet here you are. You need support, but you tell yourself this is not about me. And that is something all of the caregivers that I've spoken with struggle with. They are not the ones who are sick, and so they minimize their own feelings, as if they are not allowed to feel angry, fearful, confused. And from what I've been told, there is a loneliness in caregiving that is difficult to describe. Everyone asks how your spouse is. Very few people ask how you are. And if they do, they expect a polite response, not the truth. They don't really want to hear that you are fearful, exhausted, tired, angry, sometimes resentful. People don't want to come too close to cancer. It's almost as if it's catching. That I have experienced myself too. Some friends will go AWOL. They don't want to know about sickness. It makes them feel uncomfortable. So they may text you once or twice, maybe bring around a casserole, and then they fade into the distance. And there is no judgment on that one. I have done something similar to a friend of mine, and it is something I am ashamed of, and I will always be ashamed of. You can be sitting right next to the person that you love, and yet it's as if there's this wall between you. You miss the version of your life that was normal. You miss the person that you love, even though you are sitting right next to them. Caregivers often describe working on autopilot. They get up, they check on the patient, they make breakfast, they check on the medication, they talk to the insurance company, they take you wherever you need to go, they do the laundry, they keep the household running. And keeping busy like that can distract you, but at the end of the day, when all of that stops, you're hit by the reality again. You realize you haven't taken a deep breath all day. The cancer world calls that caregiver burden, but that term really doesn't capture the human side of things, the exhaustion that you feel, the frustration with a patient who won't cooperate, the guilt of wanting just a single day of normalcy, a single day where you don't talk about cancer. You snap at small things because you've been holding everything in. And then you're overcome with this feeling of guilt. You think that one day you're going to regret saying stuff like that. You can't be mean to him now because one day you'll look back and go, I really wish I hadn't said that. Once treatment starts, you move on to a new reality. Some people have chemo, some people have radiation, some people have stem cell transplants. There are lots of different treatment plans. I won't get too graphic, but the truth is, those treatments come with some really nasty side effects. Projectile vomiting, extreme fatigue, weakness, uncontrollable diarrhea. And again, you feel helpless because there's nothing you can do. In my case, I had a stem cell transplant, what used to be called a bone marrow transplant. After I had gone through treatment, a friend of mine told me about a friend of hers who also had a stem cell transplant. And the hospital that she was being treated at did it on an inpatient basis. The doctor told my friend that of the 18 people in that ward, 6 would survive. I don't know if that was actually a fear for me, but I know it was for John. He was extremely worried that I would not survive it. My sister spent about 5 weeks with us, looking after me while John was working. She took me into the hospital every day, she cooked, she supported John. She did everything that I would have done, and I was just too sick to do. I could see that it was difficult for her. She is my big sister, and she had always looked out for me. Except the time when I was 4 or 5, and she held me by my ankles and dangled me over the toilet, threatening to flush me. She was worried that I was losing so much weight. I could not stomach to eat anything. And she would come in the mornings and bring a few blueberries or a piece of watermelon or a shortbread cookie and nudge me to try and eat at least something. Or she'd bring me a scoop of ice cream at night while we lay in bed and watched The Gilded Age together. They also had a few laughs at my expense. Apparently, at times, I would start talking absolute nonsense, like gibberish. And then I would turn to her and see her trying to keep a straight face. And I'd say, oh, I'm talking nonsense again. And she'd be like, yes, you are. And I could see how tired she was too. John would take me into the hospital on the weekends, but during the week, she would be up before 6 to get me to the hospital by 7 for that 4-hour observation. She also had to learn how to drive on the other side of the road, which was stressful for her and me. And she did most of the cooking. I think she did all of the cooking, unless we picked something up on our way home. And in the evening, she would sit with John, offering him support as well. So I could see how tired she was. John was also tired. He was working full-time during the week and running me back and forth on the weekends. So it was not fun for anyone. And that is what caregivers do. They show up. And they were cooped up for weeks. And for John, it was months. He was not able to go out and have a drink with his friends because any level of infection could kill me. We had groceries delivered. We had cleaners come in wearing surgical masks. That type of isolation is hard. At some point along the way, I got a breast cancer diagnosis too. John wasn't actually that shocked. My sister had had breast cancer, like I said, and my aunt had actually died of it. And so when the diagnosis came back, he wasn't actually that shocked. I, at that point, was punch drunk, and maybe he was too. He describes being numb. After the lumpectomy, it wasn't dramatic. It became routine for both of us. And yet, Every time a scan is scheduled, you hold your breath. And the same goes with my monthly blood tests. The results will determine whether you exhale or if you have to brace for another storm. It's more than anxiety. It is dread. It is fear. It is fatigue, all rolled into one. He waits, trying not to think about it too much, until I yell down the stairs, "Blood tests are all good this month." And then we both breathe. The truth is that cancer doesn't just attack the patient. It colonizes everything: money, relationships, energy, sleep, even your sense of self. Some caregivers describe feeling invisible because everything revolves around the patient, the disease, the next appointment. You've become the anchor, but anchors get heavy, and yet you still show up. Sitting in a waiting room at 7 a.m. with bad coffee, holding a bag underneath his chin while he throws up in the car, refilling prescriptions, reminding them to eat. It's taking care of someone's dignity when they cannot take care of their own, because you still care about them, even when you are angry, even when you're tired, even when you think, "I can't do this anymore." Caregivers burn out faster than they realize. Some have described to me feeling guilty because they want just one weekend alone, one day alone, where nobody talks about cancer. You may judge yourself for those thoughts, but you shouldn't. Needing space doesn't mean that you don't care. It means that you have limitations, which is just the human condition. If there is one truth that long-term caregivers come to realize, it is that you cannot pour from an empty cup. You need time to refill your tank, to talk to somebody about anything other than cancer, to laugh. John coped by turning off anything that stressed him out or brought him down. So no sad dramas, no horror movies, no real life crime. He doesn't watch real life crime. That's me. He disengaged with the news for the most part, stopped going on social media, stopped worrying about politics, stopped worrying about stuff on the other side of the world that he had no ability to change. Caregiving is not a set of tasks. It is an act of witness. You are seeing the person you love go through the hardest thing imaginable. You are present for the fear, for the suffering, and if you're lucky, the hope. Maybe your spouse will recover. Maybe they will go into remission and you can start to rebuild your lives. Or maybe they will die and maybe you will be left alone. And that is incredibly harsh, but it is also a reality. If you're in the middle of this right now, if you are watching the person you love go through the toughest time of their life, you're allowed to feel whatever you feel. You can be grateful and resentful. You can be loving and angry. You can be hopeful and exhausted all at once. Because at the end of it, love, when tested, is not always beautiful, but it is real. And sometimes that's enough. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being on this journey with me. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and feel free to share this with anyone you think may benefit. And I will see you in the next one.